Thanks, Ian. Morning, everyone. I'm going to get rid of some of these bits of paper up here, because last week we got halfway through and I realized I had about 10 bits of paper that had nothing to do with me, and I couldn't work out where the sermon was. So it was really embarrassing. No one noticed it. Praise God. Good. So we've been looking at Joseph now for a good 6 weeks. This is the 6th of the series, and next week will be the 7th and final of the series. And last week we looked at how Joseph revealed himself to his brothers, and in the weeks before that we'd seen basically Joseph's life, which is just full of hurt and pain, and yet blessing, and just glory to God. And today we're going to move into Genesis 49, if you want to find that in your Bible. You've missed in the last 2 chapters or so that Jacob came to see his son after all these years, Joseph, and he also blessed his sons in a way that surprised Joseph, because he blessed them back to front, and often is the way that God does something that we're not expecting. And we pray that he'll do that today as we speak. So we're going to start at the beginning of chapter 49, and we'll take it all the way through to verse 28. And you'll find, if you're doing the slides at the back, there will be one slide too many, because I don't think we need that last slide. So let's start from verse 1. Then Jacob called his sons and said, "Gather around so I can tell you what will happen to you in the days to come. Assemble and listen, sons of Jacob. Listen to your father Israel. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the first sign of my strength, excelling in honor, excelling in power. Turbulent as the waters, you will no longer excel. For you went up onto your father's bed, onto my couch, and defiled it. Simeon and Levi are brothers, their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council, let me not join their assembly, for they have killed men in their anger and hamstrung oxen as they please. Cursed be their anger so fierce, and their fury so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel. Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. You are a lion's cub, Judah. You return from the prey, my son. Like a lion that he crouches and lies down, like a lioness who dares to rouse him. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nation shall be his. He will tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch. He will wash his garments in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes will be darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk. Zebulun will live by the seashore and become a haven for ships. His border will extend towards Sidon. Issachar is a raw-boned donkey lying down among the sheep pens. When he sees how good is his resting place and how pleasant is his land, he will bend his shoulder to the burden and submit to forced labor. Dan will provide justice for his people, and as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan will be a snake by the roadside, a viper along the path that bites the horse's heels so that its rider tumbles backwards. I look for your deliverance, Lord. Gad will be attacked by a band of raiders, but he will attack them at their heels. Asher's food will be rich. He will provide delicacies fit for a king. Naphtali is a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns. Joseph is a fruitful vine near a spring, whose branches climb over a wall. With bitterness, archers attacked him. They shot him with hostility, but his bow remained steady. His strong arm stayed limber. Because of the hand of the Almighty One of Jacob, because of the shepherd, the rock of Israel, because of your father's God who helps you, because of the Almighty, he blesses you with blessings of the skies above, blessings of the deep springs below, blessings of the breast and womb. Your father's blessings are greater than the blessings of the ancient mountains, than the bounty of the age-old hills. Let all these rest on the head of Joseph, on the brow of the prince among his brothers. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours the prey. In the evening he divides the plunder. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel. And this is what their father said to them when he blessed them, giving each the blessing appropriate to him. And to cut a long story short, he dies after that. Said graciously, I assure you. Lots of stuff going on in there, isn't there? We're talking about the blessings that Jacob bestows upon his sons, but also the prophecy. In fact, the word blessing only really arrives when we get to Joseph, and then at the end it says he blessed them all. But really, this is a prophecy. This is a time of prophesying the future over the sons of Jacob. And it is a fascinating read, isn't it? As you're reading through, you're thinking, if that's a blessing, I'd hate to hear what your curse is like. But all of those blessings or prophecies came to pass. And as you read the Bible, they're all true. But today we're not going to look at all of them. And Joseph, we will leave till next week, because there's quite a really special message coming through that I think needs to stick in the last week. Now, I remember one of my fondest memories when I was working in the secular world was every year we used to wait for what you could call the blessings from your workplace, which was bonus time. And I used to wait eagerly. And it wasn't just about the idea of getting some money, because money is good, but I used to get really excited about watching those arrogant people that thought they deserved lots of money get disappointed. And I'd sit there like this, waiting for the people I didn't like very much to come out of the office with these really sour faces, because some would go in thinking, I might get something. Humble. One might go in and think, I'm probably not going to get anything. But there were people in the offices, I better get what I deserve. I'm going to go in there and I better give it to me, or I'm going somewhere else. And they never did. They'd always be back the next week. But I used to love it. I used to sit there and think, oh, yes, he got what he deserved. Because people do, don't they? They get what they deserved. And I remember when I joined Barclays, they said to me, you'll be coming in at this stage in the year, you won't get a bonus. But they called me in. I was thinking, well, this is odd. They're calling me in. And I remember walking into the office, and they sat me down, and they said, Mike, we're going to give you, this is my first ever bonus, so, it may not sound high, but it was for me. They said, we're going to give you £2,000. And I sat there thinking, well, you said I wasn't going to get it. I'm not saying anything about that. And I'm going to make sure that they do get it to me. But I remember looking at these guys, and I was just in shock. And they looked at me, and I was all quiet, because for a guy that had come from nothing, and achieved nothing and had no money, always in debt as a young man, and to be told you were going to give him £2,000, I was just like, it was like I died. I just looked at them, and they said, is that okay? I said, is that okay? I've never had any money like this before. And they came to see me about an hour later. They said, people come in and they expect a blessing. People come in and they expect stuff, but what we saw in you was this just unusual situation where, well, the manager said, we felt like crying, to be honest, because you really, really, really wanted it and you really appreciated it. And it's interesting that with blessings, we expect blessings from God, don't we? We expect God to bless us. But one of the things that I find really frustrating with Christians is we expect God to bless us no matter how we behave, how we live. I mean, you've got the whole sort of, you can't earn your salvation. We know that. But you can live out your salvation and see the blessings of God. But there are many Christians that walk around thinking, now that I'm a Christian, I've received Jesus, I can live any way I want and I will be blessed. Does that sound right? I've been to restaurants with people before who have been really rude to the people that are serving their food. And I'm thinking, mate, please don't be rude to these people while they're serving my food, because I don't know what's going to come back with it. That's just they're going to gob in your burger or something. I'm not having that. Don't come with me. One of the things we need to understand is that God is not going to bless us if we don't live for God. That if we don't do the things that God wants us to do to appreciate how good God is, He will never bless us. And it's the same for our nation. If our nation rejects God, He will not bless it. He will not bless it. There are two things called grace, special grace, and common grace. Common grace is the grace that you all have. Whether you're a Christian or not, you wake up in the morning, you breathe the air, you're alive. And then nice things happen to you, even though you're not a Christian. That's common grace, but it will end. Everyone gets a bit of that. But then there's special grace, which is the grace that a Christian receives because they believe in Jesus and they live for Jesus. That is a special grace, a special blessing. And if you are in the common grace, it will end at some point in your life. And I was reading just this week, one of our members in this church sent a letter to Crispin Blunt. Gotta love him, haven't you? Because God says you have to, but it's not easy. And his response to asking for the ban of prayers in Parliament, I was reading through his response to the letter that someone sent to him saying this is a bad idea. And the bit that caught me was this. He said, the European Union have done just fine for many years without prayer. And I sat there and thought, really? Are you watching the news? Do the European Union really look like they're doing well without prayer? If I was you, mate, I'd be protesting for it to come back. You will not get blessed if you reject God. I don't care who you are, whether you're a Crispin Blunt, Donald Trump, Donald Duck, whatever you might be. If you do not obey the Lord, you will not get blessed. And this country is starting to see what happens when you don't follow the Lord. So today we come to Jacob blessing his sons and telling them what's going to happen in the future. He says, gather around, I'm going to tell you what will happen in the days to come. And he blesses them with what they deserve. He blesses them with the things that they've done. He rewards them according to their action. And as Christians, we need to remember that. And we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. But you have to remember that Jacob blessed them in prophecy through the word of the Lord. He blessed them with all they've done. He blessed them according to what they had done. And what I want to do today, because it's a big passage, is I want to take 4 brothers that give us 4 lessons and ask us one question. And the question that it leaves us with is, what type of Christian do you want to be? What sort of Christian do you want to be? Because all of the tribes that we see here, they all reached the promised land. I mean, the individual brothers wouldn't have done, they would have died. But they all reached the promised land, at least, even if they didn't live out in it long. They reached it, but how was their life? How was their blessing? How was the rest of their time on the earth? And that's what I want to say to you today. Which sort of Christian do you want to be? And even if you have your salvation secure, how do you want your life to play out? One of blessings or one that is turbulent and you almost crash land into heaven at the end and land there with nothing other than your salvation? Because we are told that God will bless us accordingly to how we live our lives in the flesh. And we'll look at that in a bit. So what sort of Christian do you want to be? And we're going to start by looking at the hidden. And let me read to you again verses 2 to 4. Assemble and listen, sons of Jacob. Listen to your father Israel. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the first sign of my strength. Excelling in honor, excelling in power, turbulent as the waters, you will no longer excel. For you went up into your father's bed and onto his couch, and you defiled it. You know, Reuben is the firstborn. And if you understand the Bible, the firstborn is mighty blessed. He's the one that gets all of the inheritance. He's the one that will lead the family after the father. He is the one that should be mighty blessed. And he starts that way, but it changes. Why does it change? It changes because he sleeps with one of his brother's mothers and his father's concubines, one of his lovers, maybe you could say. He goes and sleeps with the woman that his father sleeps with when his father's not looking. And we're told that Jacob knows about it because he heard about it, but he does nothing about it. That passivity thing, we go back to the first week of this series, that he didn't do anything. But he did notice, he did see it. Maybe he was waiting 40 years, that period, for that repentance to come, and it never came. So when he gets to his deathbed and he gives out the blessings, this is the blessings that we hear for Reuben. All those years, Reuben must have been thinking, I've got away with this. Slept with the woman that my father sleeps with, slept with my brother's mother. I've got away with this. All is going to be just fine. No one's really noticed. But the thing we have to realize is God sees everything. He sees our actions. He sees our thoughts. He sees everything. Now, by the grace of Jesus, you don't have to panic. But because of your love for Jesus, you should want to change. You should want to live for Jesus, regardless of what everyone else is saying. 2 Corinthians 5:10 says this, "For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ." That's so that each of us may receive what is due us for the things done while in the body, whether good or bad. Every single one of us will stand before the judgment seat. It's not a pretty message. It's not one that churches like to give. The most important message nowadays for the church is everybody can be saved through Jesus. Yes, they can. And that's it. Go and do what you want until he comes back. And when he comes back, pretend you were really good. He sees everything. He sees everything. So Jacob prophesies over Reuben, and he says, "Excelling in honor and power, turbulent as the waters, you will no longer excel, for you went up onto your father's bed." These words, turbulent as waters. Turbulent is pakash in the Hebrew, and it means uncontrolled and unstable. And when you think about it, that's exactly what water is. Because if you take water and you heat it up too far, it boils, right? We all agreed on that. And if you take it and you cool it down too far, what does it do? It freezes. It freezes. So what he's effectively saying to Reuben here, he says, you're just like water. You are unstable. That the climate around you determines who you are. The climate around you directs you. You don't influence your culture and your climate, but that climate and that culture influences you, how you behave and what happens in your lives. And that is the blessings that you will receive. Because you are unstable, you are untrustworthy, and therefore you are not usable in the kingdom. And as a result, Reuben loses his birthright to Joseph, and that is then passed on to Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And what we find is that his hidden sin prevents him from excelling anymore. And the tribe of Reuben ends up being on the wrong side of many conflicts in the Bible. And no judge or prophet or leader comes out of that tribe. Let me ask you a question. How many of you are like Reuben? How many of us are just like Reuben, that we have hidden sin and hidden attitudes that we think that God doesn't see, or it doesn't matter anymore because we're under hyper, ultra, ultimate grace that will cover everything, and it will, but if you're not sorry about it and you don't care and you want to do what you want, then it probably won't do the same. You certainly won't get the blessings that you want in your lives. Are you like Reuben? Have you got stuff that is hidden that is going to come up and get you in the end? Because it's secretly there in the background and you're just wanting to ignore it. Are you like Reuben? Are you influencing your culture for Jesus, or is your culture influencing you for the world and for Satan, actually? Which one are you? I had a friend when I was growing up, and I'll keep his name to myself, but he's a great guy, a lovely guy, and he always wanted to be a police officer. And he was so committed from an early age. He's like, I'm going to be a police officer. I'm going to be a police officer. And years later, I was reading the paper, and he was there, and I was really sad because he had become a police officer, but during raids, he had decided to keep some of the stuff that they'd taken from the people that had stolen. So effectively, he had stolen. And he had put in this stuff, and one day they did a raid on him and found that this police officer had been taking stuff that wasn't his. And he lost everything. The very job that he dreamed of doing, the very person he was for a while, because people obviously wouldn't trust him, he'd lost everything because of one hidden sin that he couldn't keep control of, that came out to bite him in the end. A number of years ago, I was working in a corporate environment, and we were looking after a church. And the guys came in to see me, and they said, right, this is the naughty boy, business that we've got today. This is what we've got to do with it. And I looked and thought, it's a church. Why is this church in such a bad way? And I'm looking through. I said, where's all their money gone? Why have they got like over £100,000 overdraft? Why have you given them an overdraft? They don't need an overdraft. What is going on with this church? And the guy said, well, it turns out that the pastor was having it away with the administrator. And I said, what? And he thought that he was going to be able to hide that forever? Let me just tell you, like, I'm probably just one step ahead of everyone here, but if you're a pastor and you think that having an affair is going to stay hidden, it's a really stupid thing to think. It never will, because God sees everything, and you're just stupid if you think that. There's no other way of explaining it. And what happened to the church? It got sold. Got sold off to another church organization that took it. It was a vibrant church, a building like this. It was a great church. But the people stopped giving because the pastor stopped living for Christ. Hidden sin will come and get you. And, if that was me, I'd be expected to be out the door within 1 second, and I wouldn't want to be allowed back. Because quite frankly, why would you ever think that that would be hidden? I've learned many lessons over the years about hiding things. When I was younger, I used to have this habit of throwing mashed potato at the TV. Anyone played that game? My mum would come in, sit me on the table thinking, right, they're eating, so I can go off and whatever she was doing in the kitchen. If it was nowadays, she'd be on the old mobile phone checking Facebook, wouldn't you? But they didn't have it in those days. So there's me and my sister, hitting the news reporter in the face. But it got worse, right? Because that was mashed potato, and I quite like mashed potato, but my mum used to bring stuff into the mix that was just evil. These little green evil things, peas. And the peas used to appear on my plate, and I'd be like, what's this? I don't like this, woman. You've got to eat your vegetables. I don't like it. I don't want to eat it. And then over time, they got bigger. Brussels sprouts started to appear. And I'd be like, there's no Brussels on your plate. Oh, well, once a year, you must eat your Brussels. It's like, no one likes them. They taste like a fart. Let's not lie. They are disgusting. Why do we sell them? And so I had to find some sort of system to get rid of these green things on my plate. So I had this sort of operation I was 5, and it was probably less than what I'm saying, but I had to think about it. How do we get those evil things off my plate without Mum finding out? So what I used to do is I start by stuffing them down the back of the sofa, all right? But when when it gets filled up over months, you just got to be a bit careful about how much you stick in there. So the next thing is I'll stick them in my pockets. So you got peas in my pockets, and then I forget about them. But the long and the short story of this is the same with hidden sin. It all comes out in the wash. Seriously. When my mum got those trousers out, you didn't want to be me. And the thing is, with Reuben, it all came out in the wash. No matter how long he thought he got away with it for, he lost a lot more in the end because he hid it, and it came out, and it was never missed by God. Esau is another brother. He was unstable. Comes home one day. It says that loved Jacob but hated Esau, and it's because he was an unstable man, and he was not living for God. And one day he comes in and he's hungry after hunting, and his brother's there cooking a lovely soup or whatever it was, some broth, and he comes in and says, I'm hungry, I'm dying here, feed me. Like every man is dying if they're hungry, apparently. And he comes in, he says, feed me, and he says, well, give me your birthright. And he says, fine, take the birthright, I'll take the food. Sounds very normal thing for a man to do, doesn't it? But what it signifies in him is what it signifies in us, which is this, is that we are so led by our flesh. We are so led by our flesh. We do anything to get what our desires, our bodily desires want. We will do anything to get those things. We go past a show garage and we see these nice cars, and we think, I've got a car that works, but I like that car. And suddenly it starts to rise up. Your flesh starts to get hold of you. And suddenly you're like, I'll buy it. And you're in debt for years. And then a few years later you do the same and over, and the debt gets bigger. And it's the same with everything. With drinking and with drugs and with sex. It's like your body is saying yes, and your spirit should be saying no. Because Jesus clearly says that the spirit, the flesh is weak and the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And it's like our flesh gets hold of us, and it takes us and it guides us, and we're unstable like water because we are directed by the things around us. And I need to ask you today, is that where you are? Is your whole life directed by the things around you and the advertisements and all of the things out there? Is it directed by that? Because if it is, there's going to be no blessings. And if it is that way, you're going to find that it will hurt you and you will regret it and it will be sad and you will lose out in the end. Your salvation is secure if you believe, that is. But when you get there, will you find that actually you're not a good and faithful servant? Because Jesus says this in the parable of the talents. He gives out, the master gives out money to each of his servants, and he says, go and invest it. And he comes back, and he has servants that have invested it. And he says, good and faithful servants. And then one says, well, you are a hard master, so I buried it so it didn't go missing. And he's like, well, you could have put it in the bank and got more interest for it. And then he says this, for whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. That's Reuben. He had, and he lived for God in the spirit, but he lived in the flesh and got on his father's bed, and even what he had was passed, his birthright was passed on to Joseph and his sons. He forfeited it. He was disqualified from it. And how many of us forfeit the blessings that God promises us in this life now? He wants us to have a bit of heaven in our lives now. How many of us forfeit that, disqualify ourselves from that, and think it's because God's ways aren't good and our ways are better, and find that all of the things of the flesh that we followed have just led us to a place of desolate disaster? Have you ever thought about that? What have you missed out on? If we lustfully follow the climate around us, you will find one thing that will happen is you will not excel. And by the way, you can excel without being rich. You can excel without having nice cars. You can feel content and feel blessed by having not a lot, because the Spirit of God gives you contentment and peace in your soul. There is no car, no money, no drug, no beautiful woman or slightly good-looking man that will ever be better than the peace of God in your heart, and that's the blessing you want before any else. That's it. But do you not have the peace in your heart because you are led by the flesh and therefore not by the Spirit, and therefore you are unstable like water, and water that's unstable disappears and evaporates, and there's nothing left? Think about that. So that's the hidden. But what about the out of control? Let me read to you verses 5 to 7 again. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council. Let me not join their assembly. For they have killed men in their anger and hamstrung oxen as they please. Cursed be their anger and so fierce, and their fury so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel. Simeon and Levi, their story takes a turn, because when we at Reuben, we see this hidden sin that comes out. But with Simeon and Levi, what they tend to do is they parade their sin. They're like, I don't care. And they do it all openly. They go and do whatever they want. They're just not bothered. They just go and do it. And the reason they go off and commit this horrible sin that Jacob is alluding to is that in Genesis 34, their sister Dinah is raped by a chap called Shechem. And Shechem comes to them and says, well, now that I've raped your sister, what I'd really like to do, this is what every honorable rapist does, I'd like to take her hand in marriage. You know, what an odd thing to say. I've raped her. You know, why didn't he date her first and see if something happened? No, he was a nasty man. But he comes, he says, I want to take her hand in marriage. And then the brothers say to him, Levi, Simeon, they say, well, that's okay. You can take her hand in marriage, no problem. But what we want you to do is we want you to take all the men in your company and we want you to circumcise them. And then when he says, yes, I'll do that, they all go and get circumcised, and they're in the height of the pain. And then Simeon and Levi are like, great, they're in pain now, let's go and attack them. And they kill all the men. So it was a trick. But they think that's a really good thing to do. And you really need to ask yourselves at this point, is that the two wrongs make a right? The two wrongs make a right. I was watching a documentary this week by Stacey Dooley, and it was a documentary in Ireland. And I was horrified because I've lived in some cloud cuckoo land for many years. And in Ireland, they don't have much trust in the police, in certain parts of Ireland, obviously not all of it. And therefore, they have these like militia that come and govern the towns. And so what they do is they look for people that are antisocial. And if there are young men, or particularly young men, I've never saw any women on the list, but if they are joyriding, beating people, stealing, whatever it might be, they would take matters into their own hands. They would take what they call a threat, and they would go to the house, they give a threat, and it says, you've been seen doing this, this, this. We are going to call you for an appointment. You'll come to this appointment, and we'll shoot you in both your kneecaps and both your ankles. Sounds really drastic, doesn't it? And it sounds beyond the point, but it was absolutely true. And so these young men would drug themselves up, not knowing when the day was coming. And then when the day comes, they would actually go for the appointment, and they would allow, well, they had no choice, to be shot in their knees and ankles. And when Stacey Dooley finally got to meet with these people, because it's very hard, because it's all hidden behind the scenes, and asked them about it, they're like, well, these guys have done wrong, and we're kind of like teaching them a lesson so we help the whole community out. Do two wrongs make a right? Does that sound like a good thing to do? Does that sound like a godly way to live? Well, that was Simeon and Levi. I tell you what, we'll go and get revenge. But Jacob rebuked them. And he said to them that they were cruel and that they were horrible. And these two men had blatant disregard for God, blatant disregard for others. They obviously had blatant disregard for God's power to change people, because if they really knew what was going on, they would have prayed for those people. And Jacob says, I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel. And Simeon's tribe becomes the smallest of all the tribes, drops right down the pecking order, and he also is omitted from the blessing of Moses. He suffers. But then what about Levi? He's also scattered. However, something happens. In Exodus 32, Moses comes across rebellion, and then he says, who will stand for the Lord? Who will stand beside me? And the Levites come and stand beside him. Like there's this little bit of repentance that goes on, and then he says, right, you will become the priest of the Lord. So you see this turnaround. And there's three things that we see in all of this Simeon and Levi story. And the first is this: if you live by the flesh rather than the spirit, you will never achieve the potential that God has, the potential blessing and the potential life that God has for you. That if you live like Levi and live like Simeon, where you live only by the flesh, where you are angry, and when you respond to people with anger, and you come to church on a Sunday and you say, oh, I'm a Christian, but I'm going to treat that person like this at home. I'm going to treat that person like this in the workplace. When someone wrongs me, I'm going to get them back. When we live like that, the blessings of God are not upon us. They're just not there. And how do we know if we are living like that? Does everyone, this might be an interesting fact actually, let's work it out. Hold up your Bibles. If you got your Bibles, hold it up. First problem, I can count about 30 Bibles in a church of 400. That's the first problem. Seriously, that's the first problem in this place. How do you know if you're living by the flesh or whether you're living in the spirit? This thing goes with you everywhere. But the question I want to ask you about this word is, how much of it matters to you? How much of it can you take open and say, I believe in this. I trust in this word. How much of this word counts today in the culture you're in? How much of it matters anymore? How much are you going to follow? Because that will determine whether you really are living in the world of Levi and Simeon and even Reuben, or whether you're living in the world of the Spirit by God, where you say, this is the ultimate way to live our lives. And there'll be people in here today saying, yeah, I'm down with that. And then we'll come to you and say, well, how do you feel about gay marriage? Well, that's all right, because culture says it's okay. Well, listen, unstable as waters. You are influenced by the climate and culture around you. So you decide whether this counts according to what the culture around you says. Oh, but things have changed. Everything's changed. And, hey, God never said stop loving people. His word says here, love everybody. I'm going to teach on this properly this year because we're getting to a point where we can't avoid it. But God's word says you must love everybody. That means you must love someone if they're white and if they're black, if they're male and if they're female, if they are gay or whether they are straight. You must love them because that's what his word says. It says you must love the thieves. It means you mustn't shoot their ankles out and their kneecaps. It says that here. But it doesn't say that in loving people that you accept that their way is the right way on everything. And we have people divided in here, I'm sure. And I can tell you that I'm one of the last pastors among my company that will openly talk about this. We have to talk about it. We have to talk about it because it's coming to a place near you. I have a friend that has just lost his job because he would not marry a gay couple and his church kicked him out. Listen, if you do that to me, I'll dance with my bags, because if you are asking a pastor who wants to stand on the word to pastor, but you're asking him to ignore what it says, I don't want to be part of a church like that. I don't want to be a church. I would be happy to walk away, sad in heart, but happy to go and move where God wants to call me. But what I've got to say to you today is that this is a really big issue. It's the biggest one of our time. It's the one that is so obviously going to come, and that Jesus did talk about it. But something we need to ask ourselves is, when it gets hot, are we going to boil, or are we going to stand with God in everything? But these are big issues, and people don't want to talk about them, and I don't mind talking about them because I hold this job like that. But something I want to tell you is that we need to work out who we are in Christ, what His Word says, and whether we are going to stand on it. And if we don't even have this Word, of course we're going to be influenced by the people around us. We must love all people. But first of all, we must love God in the way that He wants us to live. Because there are two kingdoms. There is a kingdom of this world and a kingdom of God. And you don't need to judge anyone out of God's kingdom. We're not called to do that. So no matter how you live your life and what choices you make, it's not for us to judge. However, when someone says, I want to come in under the kingdom of God, then they live under the kingdom that is written in here. That's what you need to do. Some of you might find that hard today. I will not apologize. I really won't. I'm really not bothered in the slightest what people think of me. What I'm bothered about is what He thinks of me. And that when I get to the end, I'm a good and faithful servant, even if I've been beaten and whipped along the way, because I know that if I ignore this word, then I will not see the blessings of God in this time, and I will not be rewarded accordingly in that time. But remember, the one word I started with is that you love everybody, regardless whether they're black, white, woman, female, man, gay, straight. You love all people. You can accept all people in churches, but you cannot affirm everything that everyone does. Acceptance and affirming are two different things. But you can still love people that do things a different way to you without judging them and treating them badly. But it does not mean that you have to change God's word. So are we standing on His word, or are we like Levi and Simeon who just want to go and live according to the flesh? Are we like the Reubens of the world that the climate around us decides what our theology is, or do we stand on God's word? And in fact, we don't stand on this word. To stand on it is to do this, to stand over it and to influence what it says, but we stand under it and let it influence us. It should be downloaded into us. We should not be downloaded into it. We should be walking on His word, under His word, and under His authority if we want to see blessings in this world. Reuben, Levi, Simeon were not. The second thing we learn from Levi and Simeon is that you pass your attitudes and your habits on to your children. Their inheritance and everything that happened beyond them in their tribes was affected by their behavior. Their children suffered because of it. I've been going through a particular learning situation in my life recently. I found out that actually I'm not really Michael Williams. I know you're going to think, well, how's he get to that? My real name is Michael Jordan. Okay, and you're thinking, well, 6'5" black guy, no. But if I could be, I would be, right? That would be my dream. But the thing is, I found out recently that my granddad, who was my real granddad, my dad was adopted by his stepdad. His name was Jordan, not Williams, so I would have been a Jordan. And so I've been looking into that with my sister, and we found that my granddad had been unfaithful. And that caused the marriage to break, and then my dad was adopted by his stepdad. But he died when my dad was 2. So he had a heart attack and died, which doesn't bode well for me, but I'm got 2 years left, apparently. And I don't really believe that. But the interesting thing is, when I was told at the beginning about the unfaithful, you know when you're with your parents, you've only heard one side of the story. You kind of write people off as a child. You're like, oh, I won't go near that person then. But since I met Jesus, the grace of God has changed my heart. And so I started to look into it. I thought, do you know what? My granddad made a mistake, one mistake. And actually there's letters that are apologizing and saying he's so sorry for what he did. And because he died, he never had that chance to do anything about it. So he never saw his son after 2 years old. My dad has been, he's the only one left in the whole of his side of the family. He doesn't know any of them. He's on his own. And he just feels like he's a no man, And finally, he's getting these pictures of his dad and his life's coming back together. And we're sitting there thinking, actually, because, we love our step families that have loved us and looked after us, but that's all we've had, actually. We've only had step families looking after us. It's really good to know where you come from. But one of the things, and the whole point of this long-winded story that I'm enjoying telling and no one else cares about, is one man's sin has had a massive impact on many lives. Dad never had a dad. I never had a granddad. We've always been part of step families who have loved us great, but there's always something about having your family, your heritage, and knowing where you came from. And it's all because of one sin that just traveled through. You pass on to your children. I'm not talking about generational curses and sins, because I believe Ezekiel said that it will no longer pass on, and that's a debate for some of us charismatics in here. But what I am saying is that you do pass on some of your mistakes. You do pass on some of your habits, because your children will model what you do, and what you leave behind they pick up. And it's really important that we do something for our children today. It's really important that your faith affects your children in the future in a good way. It's really important that if you don't hold on to this and you say, well, I'm going to let the climate around us dictate what this says, guess where your children are going to be in years to come? No faith, or very warped faith, or believing in the wrong Jesus, actually. It comes down to us. It comes down to us for all those little beings that are being taught in school how they should live, think, and behave without any God input. We're going to leave that to be their future faith chance, are we? It comes down to us. We pass it on. The third thing we learn is that Levi shows us that there's always a way back. Simeon suffered. He had lots of issues, but Levi stood beside Moses and said, I'll stand up. And therefore, he showed a bit of repentance, and then he was blessed because of it. And they were given like 43 houses of refuge that they would take care of as the priestly people. He's like this little bit of repentance said, actually, no matter who you are, where you are, and how deep your sin is, God will forgive you. God will bring you back because he is a gracious, loving God. No matter how far down the line in the wrong way you've gone, God wants to bring you back, even if you've gone in and killed 100 million people or whatever Levi killed. I don't know how many it was. That was very exaggerating. But he will forgive you. And he loves you. And he wants to bring you back in. And finally, which brings us to the final point, is that throw it down is the final point. Verses 6 to 12. It says, let me not enter their council. It's 8 to 12. Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. You are the lion's cub, Judah. You return from the prey, my son. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down. Like a lioness who dares to rouse him. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he whom it belongs comes, and the obedience of the nations shall be his. He will tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch. He will wash his garments in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes will be darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk. Judah's story is a special story. When we look back at Judah, we see this man that did so many things wrong. And the obvious one is that he's involved in that conversation at the beginning where he says, let's kill him. Let's kill Joseph. Let's get rid of the dreamer. That'll solve all our problems, won't it? And we also see that he married an unbeliever. And we also know that he raised 2 evil sons. And we know also that he slept with what was a fake prostitute. Turned out to be his daughter-in-law or something. And then he tried to burn her as well for it before he realized who it was. But he slept with a so-called prostitute. This was a man that was doing so much wrong. Yet he confessed his sin and he changed. Reuben held out to the end thinking he got away with it. Levi and Simeon paraded their sin. But here's a man that done so much wrong and he threw it down. In the Bible, to confess your sin means to throw it down, to let go of it, to throw it down. And when we let go of something, when we throw it to the ground, we disarm the enemy. You know, the devil only has a foothold in your life if you allow him to have it. That when you throw down the sin in your life, when you say, even if it's a case of I'm struggling with this sin, I'm struggling to put it down. Even if you're struggling to put it down, but you say to the Lord, I so desperately want to put it down, he will help. It's when we deny it's there and when we live in a way and pretend it's not there, that's when it has a foothold. That's when it comes back to get us. That's when God will see everything and say, actually, look what you did here. But actually, we have permission in Jesus to take whatever it is we're struggling with and just throw it down. And then Satan comes along and says, oh, look what you did. And then God says, well, hang on a second. I redeemed that on the cross. My son said it's finished, so therefore it's finished. Those the son sets free are free indeed. Indeed. So what you have here is you have 4 brothers, one that hides it, 2 that parade it, one that confesses it and covers it in the grace and the blood of Jesus Christ and cannot be held, and therefore the devil has no hold over him. Who are we? Which Christian do we want to be? Because you don't need to feel down about something that you're struggling with. You just need to throw it down in front of the Lord and say, help me. I'm sorry. I don't want to be this person. And I'm not going to lie to you all today and say that it always just disappears instantly. It's really easy. It's not. There's little sins that we really, habitual sins that we struggle with. But God says, I'll be with you in that struggle. Just throw it down, lay it down, throw it down, stamp on it and kick it if you want to. Just get rid of it. And you will be free. Now, I read a story this week about a woman, and the band want to be sort of ready to do what they do. I read a story this week about a woman in America. And this woman in America, she met the man of her dreams. The man met his woman of her dreams, and they met in a Bible study. Great place to meet. There's a bit of encouragement for you all. And so they meet in this Bible study, and they fall in love. And within 2 weeks, they're dating, and within a year, they're married, and everything is bliss, just as it was when I met my wife. And life was amazing. And then they have a child. Gets even better. They have this child, and looking at the child, and then the woman of his dreams, starts to change. And she looks at this child, and she suddenly starts to disappear inwards and go really down. And over time, she gets protective of this baby, and then she bans the family from seeing the baby, and everything is just weird. Eventually, it gets so weird that they have to separate. One day, he comes out, and his father's like, go inside, go inside. What's wrong? The woman had committed suicide in a car outside his house. And he's like, where did this all go wrong? And so when the police came around, he said, well, I've got these boxes that I've never looked in. And you know, I'm scared to look into. And the police officer said, you've got to do it. I will hold your hand. We will open these boxes and we will have a look. So they opened these boxes that were so secretive, and they find these documents. His wife was never named what his wife was named. That actually she'd stolen a dead person's identity. Because something had happened in her life that was so traumatic that she couldn't bear being her anymore. And so she hid it for all of these years, and eventually it ate her up, and she took her life. And you know what? The moral of the story is this. If she had spoke to her husband, if she had just brought it out and thrown it down, he would have forgiven her, and she would have been set free. She would have got help. But so much of what we struggle with, we hide, and we live this hidden identity. Even if we have the same name, we pretend we're holy Christians, or we pretend everything's okay. We pretend we're really happy. But what we find is it eats us, and it doesn't need to. That we can throw it down, that if you're in a true church of Jesus Christ, he's ready to love us and to forgive us and to set us free forever. God says to Judah, you are the lion's cub. You know, the lion is the king of beasts, but he's only the lion's cub. And the reason he's only the lion's cub is because there was a greater lion of Judah to come. But the beautiful thing is that this sinful man, this great sinful man, gave birth to a great Savior. That even though he was so low, and the worst of all, like Paul says it, God was able to do great things through him. And the thing I leave you with today is, will you bring everything into the light? And will you allow God to do a great thing in you? No longer live a lie, but let the true identity come out. We are sinners. We are redeemed. It is finished. We are free. Amen? Amen. Let's stand and worship the Lord.